Haile Selassie I was born as Tafari Mikonnen in 1892 into an Ethiopian aristocracy that traced its lineage directly to King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. From the beginning, his life was shaped by tradition, destiny, and ambition. As a young noble in the court of Emperor Menelik II, Tafari stood out for his intellect, his mastery of both Amharic and European languages, and his keen understanding of politics. By the age of 20, he was appointed governor of Harar, where he implemented modern education systems, built new infrastructure, and reformed the local administration. Even at this early stage, he revealed a careful balance between progress and tradition, a signature approach that would define his reign. In 1916, Ethiopia underwent a bloodless coup that saw the rise of Empress Judaitu. Tafari, then in his mid-20s, was named regent plenipotentiary and heir to the throne. For the next 14 years, he ruled in all but name. He continued to modernize Ethiopia's institutions, expand diplomatic relations with the West, and cautiously strengthen the military. He understood that in an Africa dominated by European empires, sovereignty had to be actively defended, not just with tradition, but with modern tools. In 1930, following Empress Judatu's death, Tafari was crowned Emperor Haile Selassie I. His coronation was a deliberate statement to the world. He took the titles King of Kings, Lord of Lords, Conquering Lion of the tribe of Judah, echoing biblical language and reinforcing his Solomonic lineage. The coronation was attended by dignitaries from across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. It was broadcast in newspapers around the globe. Ethiopia, ancient, proud, and still independent, had placed a modern monarch on the throne. Haile Selassie immediately set about transforming Ethiopia's internal structures. He introduced the country's first written constitution in 1931, limited the power of the aristocracy, centralized authority under the monarchy, and expanded secular education. New ministries were created, laws were codified, diplomats were sent abroad, roads, telegraphs, and schools were built. But all of this would soon be tested by one of the most brutal invasions in modern African history. In 1935, Benito Mussolini's fascist Italy invaded Ethiopia in a ruthless attempt to expand its empire, despite commanding a passionate and courageous resistance. Haile Selassie's army was overwhelmed by superior Italian firepower, including tanks, aircraft, and illegal chemical weapons like mustard gas. Villages were bombed, civilians were massacred. The League of Nations, a body Selassie had worked hard to engage, failed to intervene meaningfully. So in 1936, he did what no African monarch had ever done before. He stood before the League of Nations in Geneva and gave a historic speech that shook the conscience of the world. Speaking in French, he denounced the Italian invasion and warned of the consequences of unchecked aggression. "It is us today," he declared. "It will be you tomorrow." Though his plea did not stop the invasion, his words cemented him as a global symbol of anti-fascist resistance and moral clarity. The speech would echo through history, a prophetic warning on the eve of World War II. Forced into exile in England, Selassie lived modestly in Bath while continuing to campaign for Ethiopia's liberation. He maintained a government in exile, wrote his memoirs, and built alliances. During World War II, he leveraged Ethiopia's strategic position to gain support from the Allies. In 1941, with British military assistance and support from Ethiopian patriots, he returned to Addis Ababa and reclaimed his throne. His triumphant return was not merely a personal victory. It marked the first successful resistance against European fascism by an African nation. In the 20th century, it restored Ethiopia's sovereignty and inspired liberation movements across the continent. After the war, Haile Selassie expanded his efforts to modernize Ethiopia. He established new universities, reformed the tax system, abolished slavery, and expanded public works. Ethiopia became a founding member of the United Nations. Selassie positioned his country as a beacon of African independence, one of the only African nations never colonized, and used that moral capital to influence the growing Pan-African movement. In 1963, Haile Selassie hosted over 30 African heads of state in Addis Ababa to found the Organization of African Unity, the predecessor of today's African Union. He envisioned a future where African nations would work together to promote peace, resist neocolonialism, and develop their economies independently. Though the OAU faced challenges, its creation was a historic milestone, and Selassie's leadership made Ethiopia the diplomatic capital of Africa. Internationally, Selassie traveled extensively and met with world leaders from JFK to Khrushchev, from Nasser to Nehru. He was a central figure in Cold War diplomacy and a rare African leader who commanded respect on the global stage. In speeches at the UN, he advocated for collective security, racial equality, and world peace. His words would later be quoted in Bob Marley's iconic song War, which introduced Selassie's message to a new generation. And yet, beyond politics, Selassie became a spiritual icon. In the 1930s, the Rastafari movement emerged in Jamaica. Inspired by his coronation and biblical lineage, they declared him the returned Messiah, the living God, and the Redeemer of the African diaspora. Though Selassie never claimed divinity and remained a devout Ethiopian Orthodox Christian, he did not reject the movement outright. He welcomed Rastafari delegations to Ethiopia, offered land in the region of Shashamane for those wishing to repatriate, and acknowledged their reverence with humility. Through reggae music and global countercultural movements, Haile Selassie's image, regal, stoic, mystical, spread far beyond Africa. He became a symbol of black pride, resistance, and spiritual awakening. But back home, cracks had begun to form. Despite his achievements, Selassie's centralized rule came under criticism. Economic inequality persisted. Famine struck, and the imperial government was seen as slow to respond. Corruption and bureaucracy weakened public trust. University students and the growing middle class demanded reform. In 1973, a devastating famine in the north was exposed by international media. The world saw the suffering of Ethiopians while the palace seemed out of touch. Military dissatisfaction grew. In 1974, the Derg, a Marxist-Leninist military junta, staged a coup. The emperor, now in his 80s, was deposed and placed under house arrest. A year later, in 1975, he died under mysterious circumstances. Many believe he was murdered. The Derg buried his body beneath the palace floor. It would remain hidden for decades, until 2000, when Haile Selassie was reburied with state honors and global attention. Today, the legacy of Haile Selassie I is complex, vast, and enduring. To some, he was a reformer who modernized an empire. To others, he was a divine redeemer who embodied African dignity in a racist world. To historians, he remains a towering figure, a leader who navigated centuries of tradition while facing the brutal realities of modern geopolitics. He helped liberate Ethiopia not once, but twice. He gave voice to Africa on the global stage, and he left behind a spiritual and political legacy that continues to inspire millions. From the halls of the UN to the hills of Jamaica, from the streets of Addis Ababa to playlists around the world, the story of Haile Selassie is not just a chapter in African history. It is a story of power, resilience, vision, and the unbreakable spirit of a people who would not bow to empire.